I never imagined one evening could change the way I looked at two people I loved and trusted more than anyone. Else I had known my best friend since college. We shared everything from secrets to dreams to heartbreaks. We were like sisters. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone smile. And when she met her husband, I was genuinely happy for her. He seemed perfect, charming, stable and devoted. They looked like the couple everyone wanted to be. I remember being there at their wedding, smiling through tears, watching them promise forever to each other. I thought they had everything. I had no idea that years later, one night would test everything I believed about love and loyalty. That night started like any other. She had invited me over for dinner. Her husband was grilling. Outside, the weather was warm, and the soft evening air carried the smell of smoke and laughter. I arrived with a bottle of wine and a small dessert. She loved her smile, was wide and welcoming. She hugged me tightly, like always, and we sat in her backyard talking about work, about how fast life was moving, about things that didn't seem to matter much but felt safe to say. Her husband joined us a little later. He had always been polite, always respectful, never anything that made me uncomfortable. He poured wine for us and cracked a few jokes. It felt like the easy comfort of old friends. After dinner, she had to take a call from her sister. She went inside and told us she'd be back in a few minutes. I stayed outside on the porch. Her husband sat a few feet away, just sipping his drink. For a moment, there was a silence that felt different, heavier. I tried to keep it light, talking about random things, but his eyes lingered a little longer than usual. There was something in his look that made me shift slightly in my seat. It wasn't the friendly warmth I was used to. It was something else, something I didn't want to name. He smiled faintly, then looked away, but the silence stayed. When she came back, everything felt normal again. We talked, we laughed. She teased him for burning part of the chicken, and I tried to shake off that small, uncomfortable feeling, but it stayed like a whisper at the back of my mind. Later, when it was time to leave, she insisted I stay over. It was late, and she didn't want me driving home alone. I agreed, because that's what I always did. We had done it 100 times before. Sleepovers were nothing new to us. She went upstairs to get some blankets ready for me, and her husband helped clean up. I stayed in the living room scrolling through my phone, trying not to overthink that brief, awkward moment. When he came back from the kitchen, he asked if I wanted water. I nodded, and he handed me a glass. His hand brushed mine lightly. It could have been nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. There was a look in his eyes again, quiet but intense, like he wanted to say something he shouldn't. The air felt thick, and I suddenly wanted my friend to come back downstairs. He asked softly if everything was okay, and I said yes, maybe too quickly. He smiled again, that same look, that same silence. It felt wrong, but I couldn't find words. I excused myself and went to the guest room. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. I told myself I was imagining things. He had always been respectful. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe it was just the wine. Maybe it was me, but deep down I knew something had shifted. I heard them talking upstairs, laughing faintly, like nothing was wrong. I wanted to close my eyes and forget that feeling, but I couldn't. It was like something had been broken between us. Without words, without action, just a look that carried too much. The next morning I woke up early. I helped make coffee, trying to act normal. She was cheerful, her husband was calm. Nothing seemed strange, but when he looked at me again over the table, I saw it, that quiet intensity that shouldn't have been there. My chest tightened. I avoided his eyes, pretending to focus on my mug. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to raise suspicion. When she hugged me goodbye, she thanked me for coming, said we should do this more often, and I smiled, but it felt hollow inside. Driving home, I kept replaying that moment, the way his eyes had changed, the way silence had filled the air like it carried meaning. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but a part of me knew it wasn't, and that scared me because she was my best friend, and I loved her like family. And the thought of anything breaking that bond made me feel sick. I told myself I'd forget it. I'd bury it deep and never think of it again, but guilt has a way of finding its way back, and that night, his look followed me like a shadow I couldn't shake. For days I tried to act normal. She texted me, we joked about work, about life, about silly things, but every time her name popped up on my screen, I remembered that night, that look, that silent moment that changed everything. I wished it never happened. I wished I could go back to the time when I could visit her home without feeling uneasy, but something had shifted forever, and I didn't know how to face it or what to do about it. I didn't tell her, I didn't tell anyone. I just tried to move on, but deep inside, I knew this story wasn't over, because some looks don't fade, they stay hidden behind smiles, waiting for the next chance to be seen. Days turned. into weeks, and life went on like nothing had happened, but inside me something kept stirring like a quiet storm. I tried to forget that night, but every time I saw her name flash on my phone or heard her voice laughing, it came back. That look, that silence, that feeling I couldn't name, I avoided. Going to her house, making excuses about work, about being tired, she noticed, of course. She always did. She asked if I was okay, and I said yes, because how could I tell her that her husband's eyes had said things words could never say? One afternoon, she called me, saying she needed help picking a birthday gift for him. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't say no. We met at the mall, and it was like old times. We laughed, we tried perfumes, we looked through shirts and watches. But every time she said his name, I felt my stomach twist, like guilt was sitting quietly beside us. When we said goodbye, she hugged me again and asked why I hadn't been visiting. I said I'd come soon, and she smiled, that trusting, warm smile, the kind that breaks you when you know you're hiding something. A few days later, she invited me for a small weekend get-together. I wanted to say no, but she sounded so excited that I couldn't refuse. When I got there, a few people were already in the living room, music playing, laughter filling the space. It almost felt safe again, like maybe I had imagined everything. Then he walked in wearing that same calm smile, like nothing had happened, but the way he looked at me for that one brief second made me know I hadn't imagined any of it. Throughout the evening, he didn't say much, but I could feel his presence in every corner of the room, even when he wasn't looking directly at me. His gaze found its way back, and every time it did, I felt trapped between fear and something I didn't want to name. When I helped her in the kitchen, she teased me about dating someone, and I laughed nervously. She said I needed someone good, someone steady. Like her husband, I froze for a second. My smile faded, and she didn't notice. She kept talking, and I felt my chest tighten, because if only she knew what his eyes were saying behind her back. Later that night, after everyone left, she insisted I stay over. Again, I refused politely, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. She said I looked tired, and I gave in again. She went upstairs to get ready for bed. I stayed in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone. Her husband came down to put away a few glasses. He paused for a second and said softly, "We need to talk." I felt my pulse quicken. I shook my head and said there was nothing to talk about. He stepped closer. Not too close, but enough for the air to change. He said he didn't mean to make me uncomfortable that night, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. I told him to stop that. It was wrong that she was my best friend, but he looked at me with something like regret and desire mixed into one and whispered that he had never meant for this to happen. I wanted to run. I wanted her to come down that very second, but my voice wouldn't move. He said he admired me, that he saw something in me he couldn't ignore. I felt tears rising, but I held them back. I told him this conversation never happened, and I left. Before she came downstairs, I didn't even say goodbye. I drove home, shaking my hands, trembling on the wheel, my mind screaming that this was a betrayal, even though nothing physical had happened. The silence, the look, the words, they were enough to make me feel like I had crossed a line that could never be erased. The next morning, she called asking why I had left so suddenly. I lied, saying I felt sick. She sounded worried and kind, like always. And that made it worse, because she didn't deserve any of this. She didn't deserve to have people she trusted standing in silence with secrets between them. I wanted to tell her everything, but how could I ruin her peace, her marriage, her happiness? I chose to stay silent, but silence can eat you alive. Months passed. I stopped visiting. I said I was busy. She believed me. I started avoiding every place I could run into. Then I even stopped answering some of her calls. I missed her every day, but I knew things could never be the same. I couldn't look her in the eyes, knowing what her husband had said, what I had felt, what I had hidden from her. One night I saw her name light up my phone again. She left a voicemail. Her voice, soft and hurt, she said she missed me, that she didn't understand why I was pulling away, that she hoped she hadn't done anything wrong. I cried, listening to it, because it wasn't her fault. It was mine and his together. We had built a silence that destroyed something pure. Years later, I heard she had moved to another city. Her marriage had started to fall apart. She never told me why. Maybe he told her the truth. Maybe he didn't. I never found out. I still think about her. Sometimes when I pass by places we used to go, or smell the same kind of wine we shared that night, I wonder if she knows, if she ever looked at me differently too. Some nights I replay everything and wish I had spoken up that first evening when his eyes changed, before silence became our sin, before guilt became my shadow, before friendship turned into something fragile and painful. But I didn't, and that one choice cost me both of them. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't begin with a touch, it begins with a look that lasts a second too long in a heart that doesn't know how to forget.